Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, May 19th, 2022, and today we are going to be talking about the United States Senate elections as we head into November, with some very important primaries occurring last Tuesday and some very important ones coming up over the next coming weeks. I thought it would make sense to make my Senate election prediction now, so that way in 2 weeks' time from now, we can reflect on the primaries that occurred, the candidates that were nominated, and what that means for the ultimate composition of the United States Senate. Now, for a bit of additional context beyond where we are in terms of the Senate races, this is where Joe Biden is nationally. He's down about 12 points in terms of approval versus disapproval, rather the disapproval above the approval, in an overall net negative of 12.3% across the entire nation. Now, Joe Biden has been disapproved of more than he has been approved of throughout the entire time of his presidency, but he still serves in a position where his approval rating doesn't seem to be impacting the Democratic Party the same way that President Barack Obama's did or President Donald Trump's did for the Republican Party. Of course, Joe Biden's negative approval rating does play into the fact that the GOP is now doing better on the national level, but you are not finding a one-to-one vote share between the Biden approval and the Democratic Party's vote share. The Democrats, on the other hand, are doing significantly better than Joe Biden on the congressional ballot. Republicans are only up 2.3% according to FiveThirtyEight, when in Joe Biden's approval rating, he is down 12. So you find that Republicans are up about 2 points nationwide. Real Clear Politics, which just 2 days ago had the Republican Party at about a 4-point lead nationwide, has seen it reduced down to a 1.9% lead, a 2-point lead, an overall 2-point reduction across the nation in just the last couple of days. And a lot of this comes as a result of the news about Roe v. Wade being overturned. It's starting to set into the minds of the American voter. And while the decision hasn't been officially made, I do think that it is already starting to take a negative impact on the GOP. I think once the decision is fully made and that it is announced by the United States Supreme Court, you will start to see some significant pushback, especially in the more swing governor's races, where a governor really could determine whether or not abortion is illegal or legal within a state, and where you will find that pro-choice activists and those who might vote for Republicans or are independent who swing back and forth, who are vehemently pro-choice or at least somewhat pro-choice, might find themselves voting against a candidate that aligns with their political beliefs beyond abortion, because this issue is so relevant and so important in this day and age. Because should that decision go through, the 49-year protection that Roe v. Wade established in 73 would be completely gone. The precedent would be completely overturned, and the Supreme Court would allow for abortions to be ruled illegal depending on the states. Returning the power to the states means that many states, the majority of them more than likely, will vote to get rid of the right to an abortion across the state, with very few exceptions, and in many states, no exceptions altogether. And we're also going to keep that in mind, because my last Senate election projection was before the news actually broke. It's crazy to think about, but the news actually only really released about 2.5 weeks ago. That was something that came right at the beginning of the month of May, and it is very, very interesting to see just how the discussion in our nation has really revolved around it. Yes, we are still talking about healthcare. Yes, we are still talking about COVID. Yes, we are still talking about inflation and gas prices, but we are now also talking about abortion access and abortion rights, whereas a year ago, we weren't. 2 years ago, we weren't, because it was a 49-year-long precedent that had been established and set, and it was something that most people on the left did not think was going to be completely overturned or reduced down to the states. They thought maybe the Supreme Court would set a bad precedent for their views, but nothing super significant. This is the worst it could have gotten beyond the standard Supreme Court rules abortion is illegal rather than legal. Instead, having this level of access on a state-by-state basis does sort of cut very high up there in terms of one of the worst reactions or one of the worst results of this Supreme Court hearing. So, looking at our United States Senate, you are going to find that some states are a bit different than where they were just 2 weeks ago, and there's good reason for that. Keep in mind right now that the Supreme Court and their decision-making has a significant impact on the United States, which means that many of these states might be swayed one way or the other depending on the results. As we start over on the West Coast, you're not going to see much change besides Washington becoming likely Democrat, that's where it was about a few months or just 2 weeks ago. Oregon is safe blue. California is safe blue. As we move further and further over into the western part of the United States, we have some safe Republican seats. Idaho, Utah, Alaska, I would also characterize as safe. I am not saying specifically that Lisa Murkowski is safe. These ratings are based off of party ideology. I think in the top 2, you will see it come down between Kelly Tshibaka, the Trump-endorsed GOP candidate, and Lisa Murkowski, the incumbent GOP senator. The interesting thing about Alaska is that they use ranked choice voting and a non-primary system. They used to use a primary system. Lisa Murkowski, as the incumbent, lost her primary back in 2010, I believe, and then won her election through a write-in campaign. But for 2022, there are no primaries. They all go to the general, and we will see what happens. But regardless, I think it will end up between 2 Republicans, so the balance of power really doesn't matter. Hawaii ends up being safe blue. Moving further across the United States, North and South Dakota, I would characterize as safe. Kansas, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma's special election, all safe. Arkansas, Louisiana, Missouri, Indiana, no real concern here for the GOP. Kentucky, Indiana, South Carolina, Alabama, already considered to be safe. The Democrats have Illinois, they have Maryland, they have New York, they have Vermont, they have Connecticut. These states make up the Democratic Party and their deficit to the GOP, putting them at an equal footing of 45 to 45, with 10 total toss-up races. Now, in these 10 total toss-up races, I would also have to consider Washington as potentially a toss-up race, because I categorize likely states as toss-ups. Colorado starts out as one of the immediate likely states, and not because I think that it's going to be necessarily winnable on a high extent for the GOP, but more so because I think the margin will narrow down from where it was in 2020. Biden only won Colorado by a likely margin, even though it was 13.5%, which is very impressive for a national Democrat. It's still a result that doesn't say, you know, it's as blue as Nebraska is red, or Wyoming is red, or Utah is red. Colorado's a pretty Democratic state, but it's 13.5%, and I think in a red wave like 2022, it looks as if that Colorado probably will reduce, but I do think it's going to be somewhere between 5 to 15%, possibly around 9, 10, 11 points. Moving over into the likely Republican states, or at least the other one that I would characterize, the 2, actually. Ohio was the first one. Looking at the results in Ohio in the presidential level, I really think that because of this Trump bump that the GOP has gotten in Ohio, they will do very, very well. Even in 2018, when you take a look at the governor election that occurred in the state of Ohio, a blue wave couldn't even turn Ohio blue. It got very close. Richard Cordray was at 47% of the vote, but Mike DeWine, who had lost a statewide election numerous times before, actually, or not numerous times, but had lost a statewide election before, ended up winning the governor's race. Same thing can be applied in Iowa, but Kim Reynolds defeated Fred Hubble by 2.7%, but she's also not going to be in a pretty competitive position, but we're not talking about her race. We're talking about the state of Ohio. And I think with J.D. Vance's nomination, the Republican Party got the better of the 2. It could have been Josh Mandel, the 2012 nominee for U.S. Senate. We can actually take a look at that race going all the way back to the presidential election where Obama won. Let's go ahead and see past elections, 2012. Ohio actually went to Sherrod Brown by about 6 points. In 2018, you fast forward, and the margin was surprisingly enough around the same. It was 6.8% this time against Jim Renacci. Renacci. I'm not entirely sure, actually. I think I'm mispronouncing it both ways because I know someone had corrected me when I said Jim Renacci, and I thank them for it, but I remember someone also had previously corrected me and told me it was Jim Renacci. I believe Renacci. I think that's how I'm supposed to say it. Hopefully I got that correct, but at the end of the day, the point is just that Sherrod Brown won by 6 points against Josh Mandel, and that was 2012. It was a much more beneficial year for the Democratic Party in Ohio. You saw Obama win the state in 2012, so generally speaking, what the results were a large victory for the Democratic Party in Ohio. I don't know if that will be the case in 2022, especially considering that the Republican Party lucked out with their nominee. I think that J.D. Vance was the right nominee to run against Tim Ryan. I also just don't think that the environment is beneficial for a Democratic pickup in the state of Ohio. The next likely state is Florida, which pretty much just makes sense. Looking at Marco Rubio, you really never see a change in characterization. Going all the way back to the very first level, very first prediction that I had in the state of Florida, it was always likely red. And I think that is something that I've stuck by, and I think Marco Rubio is going to do very, very well. You take a look at his history, you take a look at where he had done well in the past, you find that Marco Rubio was an exceptional candidate because he won Hispanic voters in the state of Florida on a level that you typically didn't see for a Republican. He won by 7.7%, when, what we found was that Donald Trump in this race won by just 1.3%. 3-4%. So I think that's something to consider as well. Marco Rubio significantly outperformed Donald Trump in the state of Florida. And I think he very well will outperform Donald Trump's numbers from 2020 in Florida again, especially given this election year. So we're down to the remainder 7 toss-up races, and all of these are going to be characterized by tilt or lean characterizations. Now, I want us to take a look at the approval rating by state for most support for legal abortion across many of these states. And let's talk about them. You have Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, New Hampshire, Arizona, and Nevada. So North Carolina comes in at about a +5. Georgia is a +2. So the voters in these 2 states seem to approve of legalized abortion across the state. Wisconsin, +13. Pennsylvania, +13. Arizona, +13. You go further and further, and we're looking for Nevada, +32. New Hampshire, +35. Let's see if we forgot a state. Nevada, Arizona covered. Wisconsin, Georgia covered. North Carolina, Pennsylvania covered. New Hampshire. These states seem to be in heavy approval, or at least some level of approval. None of these states oppose women having mostly the right to an abortion. And I think you find this overwhelmingly in Nevada, overwhelmingly in New Hampshire. And that's why I'm going to go ahead and make the state of New Hampshire a lean blue state and keep it there. I don't think likely is going to be the easiest thing to predict or expect, but it definitely could get there, especially if that Supreme Court decision is as harsh and as ill-intended to abortion access as it seemed to have come across in the leak. As for the state of Nevada, I'm moving this from what was previously, let's go ahead and show you, it was a tilt Republican characterization. It is now a tilt Democratic characterization. That is a flip back to the Democratic Party. The GOP still, I would say, maintains their level of support in Wisconsin, but loses it slightly. It's a state that approves of abortion access by about 12 to 13 points, so that's something that Ron Johnson is going to have to combat. He is vehemently pro-life and very public about that stance. I also think that our national environment is going to be considered, and people aren't going to consider abortion to be their #1 issue, but I do think that it will be at least somewhat significant enough, especially in states like Nevada and New Hampshire, where you're talking about, net +30, +32, approvals for this procedure. That's where I think it will have the most impact. In Wisconsin, I think it'll narrow it down. I don't think it will be enough for the Democrats to win in the state of Wisconsin at this point in time. For the state of North Carolina, I would say the GOP ends up winning that race. I think overall, Ted Budd was the right nominee. Donald Trump chose the right one. Sherry Beasley, while I think would be strong in another year, 2022 just simply isn't her year. But Pennsylvania, I'm moving over from what was tilt Democrat to now lean Democrat. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I think at this point, looking at where the Oz and McCormick situation is, the Republican Party is going to likely draw this on for maybe a few weeks. I also think Fetterman is a strong nominee for the Democratic Party. I know some people have some concerns about his health now that he has a defibrillator installed in his chest, but I do think that is something that the voters won't actually take into consideration super heavily. I think it is maybe present in the minds of many voters. I think what also is in the minds of many voters is both the fact that we do see McCormick and Oz as outsiders from the state of Pennsylvania, and as of Oz's lead right now, I think the GOP also poses a significantly worse chance with Oz as the nominee. But unfortunately for the GOP, he's still maintaining this 1,000, 2,000 vote lead across the state, but we will see if that changes and what a recount will ultimately uncover. So Pennsylvania, changing characterizations now more beneficial for the Democratic Party. In addition to Doug Mastriano's nomination, Josh Shapiro and John Fetterman are likely going to but likely to do well in this election this November because of the GOP's inability to nominate strong candidates on both of these top ticket races. The final 2 toss-ups seats that I'm going to go ahead and characterize, what do we have? We have the state of Georgia, which I'm going to characterize right now as a tilt GOP state. That's where I had it previously. I think that's where I feel the most comfortable characterizing it. It is also the state that seems to care the least at most about abortion access. It's a +2 positive there across the state. Now, this is polling from, let's go ahead and see, from the Public Religion Research Institute, Pew Research Center, and Guttmacher Institute, or Mocker. But what we find from Georgia is that you're not really seeing an overwhelmingly approval from this crowd, which I think will be difficult to play well across the state. I think that voters might care in Nevada or New Hampshire looking at these numbers, but Georgia, I don't think there will be as much of an impact. And that's also not just that numbers alone. I did see that Subaru USA poll that does show Raphael Warnock up by 5, but it definitely seems like an outlier. And I also think that based on the overall average and based off of where we are nationally, that Georgia very well could elect Herschel Walker. I don't think he's this out there, completely wrong nominee for the GOP to choose, like I might think for Doug Mastriano or Mehmet Oz, but I think that there definitely can be some mistakes made here, which is why it's only a tilt Republican characterization. And the final state that I'm going to characterize is the state of Arizona. Now, this actually changes the track record of my Senate predictions. For the past couple of months, since since Joe Biden became unpopular across the United States, it became more apparent that the Democratic Party was going to lose control of the United States Senate. They weren't doing well across many of these states. Moving further and further throughout the months, it became more difficult for me to see how the Democrats were going to come back. But over the past few months, they have started to do so. In my prediction before the Roe v. Wade leak came out, the Democratic Party was actually only losing by 1 seat. The GOP doesn't seem to be in the strongest position in Pennsylvania. That has now been confirmed by Tuesday primaries. The leak reaffirms the Democratic Party's chances in Nevada, in New Hampshire. The state of North Carolina wasn't really in much consideration for Democrats. Neither was Ohio, Florida. Wisconsin seems to be within the realm of possibility, but one has pretty much stuck with them since the very beginning, and that is the state of Arizona. Now, with this characterization, I am moving Arizona into the lean Democratic column. I also do think that based off of where we are right now, that Arizona could be quite a surprise. While Wisconsin and Arizona share a very similar number when it comes down to abortion access and abortion approval, one has a Democratic incumbent and one does not. And while I don't think that it was enough to sway Wisconsin from what was a lean Republican characterization, I did think it would narrow it down. Arizona is a tilt Democratic characterization, and I think it will move the same way by a very similar amount, except it was already a Democratic victory. The result of this is that I expect right now the Democratic Party, at least, to somewhat maintain control of the United States Senate. And it's crazy to me that I'm even seeing this as a possibility, given where we are. I think it is equally possible for the generic ballot to be a Republican plus 2.3% victory and Democrats to win control of the Senate, because the map is the most beneficial map the Democratic Party could have had for this election cycle. They're not defending that many seats, and the largest majority the GOP could get would be 54 to 46. Same thing for the Democratic Party. Democrats lucked out in Pennsylvania's primaries. They are already doing well in Colorado. This leak benefits them in Nevada and New Hampshire. It makes voters here more willing to back a Democratic nominee because they very well could have and probably did in the past, but might have been unwilling to because they don't necessarily like Joe Biden. Well, they might put that aside for such a hotly contested issue that they seem to be very unified across the entire state. And I think Mark Kelly, with the incumbency factor and this slight bump, this slight resurgence to give Democratic and liberal-leaning voters a reason why they should vote rather than just being this party against me is Donald Trump's party, giving them a reason to vote for something is also something that could be considered a very big bump, or at least swaying the electorate in one direction or the other. So for right now, I am very shocked that I'm even saying this, but I do think the Democratic Party right now has a better chance at retaining Senate control than losing it. I think they could very well mess up. They've done so in the past. They started out this election cycle with a very good chance at retaining control. In fact, at one point, I expected them to gain 2 seats in the United States Senate in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. But now it's becoming harder to see. But I think maintaining 50 to 50 becomes more realistic following the leak from the United States Supreme Court. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.